Welcome to the Outpouring Worship Center podcast. This week, we're diving into a message Pastor Tim brought on Sunday called Come to the Table, a really rich look at what communion actually is, what it means, and why it matters, way beyond just a ritual we observe. I think this one's going to stick with a lot of people.
Jordan, this message has been building in me for a while. I've been watching our church family gather week after week, and I just felt this nudge from the Lord that we needed to rediscover what it means to come to that table, like not just go through the motions, but actually arrive. There's a difference between showing up and being present, and I think a lot of us, myself included at times, have slipped into just showing up. What really shaped this sermon was thinking about the Corinthian church and how Paul had to write to them because they'd turned communion into something self-centered and divisive. They were eating and drinking without any regard for one another or for what Christ had actually done. And I thought, man, that's not as ancient a problem as we'd like to think. I want us at OWC to be a church that comes to the table with intention, with gratitude, with our eyes wide open.
That contrast you drew between a ritual and a proclamation, that really landed for me on Sunday. Can you unpack that a little more? Because I think most of us grew up thinking of communion as this quiet, personal, kind of solemn moment, and you flipped that around pretty significantly.
Yeah, and I want to be careful because there is a place for that reverent, personal moment. You can absolutely have communion at home, just you and the Lord, and that's legitimate and beautiful. But what Paul is writing about in 1 Corinthians 11 is something bigger than that. He says, For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. That word proclaim, it's the same category of word used for preaching the gospel to the lost. So when we lift that cup together on a Sunday morning, we are not just having a quiet spiritual moment. We are preaching. We're preaching with our bodies. We're declaring to each other and to the spiritual realm that Jesus died, that his blood established a new covenant, and that he is coming back. I said it Sunday, and I'll say it again. When you take that cup with the rest of the church family, you are planting a flag. You are saying, I am here because of what Jesus did. I belong to him, and I am not leaving.
I love that image, planting a flag. But here's where I want to push a little, because I think people hear that and it sounds powerful on Sunday morning. What does that actually look like on a Tuesday? Like, how does the proclamation you make at the table on Sunday carry into the rest of the week?
That's the real question, right? And honestly, it doesn't always feel dramatic. I talked Sunday about my morning routine. For years, I was that guy who rolled out of bed just in time to shower, get out the door, grab coffee at work, and go. And that's fine. You survive, but you're not starting your day centered. Now, I get up earlier and I take those first quiet minutes. Sometimes it's with coffee. Sometimes I'm still half asleep. I'm not going to pretend I'm always on fire for the Lord at 6 a.m. But I make the effort to just be with God before the world starts pulling at me. And that's the key phrase I want people to grab onto: before the world starts pulling, because it will pull. As soon as you walk out of the sanctuary on Sunday, or as soon as you walk out of your front door on Monday morning, everything is tugging at you. The proclamation you made at the table on Sunday has to be reinforced by the habits you build the rest of the week. And that starts with where you put your attention first thing in the morning. Jesus isn't waiting for you to feel motivated. He builds the habit in you. You just have to be willing to show up for it.
That's so honest, and I appreciate that. You mentioned Jesus building the habit. There's something almost countercultural about that, because we tend to think habits are things we manufacture through willpower. But let's talk about the communion itself, because you made this point that really struck me. You said communion isn't a passive ceremony we observe, it's something we actively enter into. What does that distinction mean to you theologically?
So the Corinthian church had it backwards, and I think we can drift that direction too if we're not paying attention. They were going through the motions, eating, drinking, but not discerning the body, not recognizing what it represented, not even treating each other rightly in the process. Paul's correction is essentially, you have missed the entire point. The Last Supper wasn't just a dinner. When Jesus broke that bread and lifted that cup, he was announcing his own death. He was saying, this is my body, this is my blood, and I am about to give it for you. That's an act of profound intention, not passive ceremony. So when we come to the table, we're meant to bring that same intention back. I said Sunday, sometimes you come tired, you come distracted, you're carrying last week's weight, and that's okay. Come anyway. The act of remembering is itself transformative. It pulls you back to the center when everything else is pulling you toward the edges. And theologically, we're doing what Paul said. We are proclaiming the Lord's death until he comes. That's not a short assignment. That is a lifetime of work, Sunday after Sunday, year after year.
What about the person who hears all of that and still struggles to feel anything during communion? Maybe they've been in church their whole life and it has become routine, not because they're spiritually dead, but because life is heavy and they're tired. What do you say to that person pastorally?
I say, welcome to the human condition, and Jesus is not surprised by you. I said it Sunday, and I meant it. You don't always feel it when you come to the table. Sometimes you come weary, sometimes you come dry, and I'm not going to stand up there and tell you that every single time is going to be this mountaintop spiritual experience, because that's not honest. What I will tell you is that the act of coming is itself an act of faith. When you show up, even when you don't feel it, you are saying to God, I trust that this is real even when my emotions aren't confirming it. That's actually a mature kind of faith. I talked Sunday about coming to Jesus as a broken vessel. I came to him broken, and I'll be honest, I still get cracks now and then. Life does that to you, but the table is not reserved for the put together people. It's for the broken ones, the tired ones, the ones who shuffled in from the parking lot carrying a week's worth of hard. Come anyway. The remembrance will do its work in you even when you can't feel it happening.
You know, that connects to something else you said that I want to dig into. The idea of communion as a corporate act, not just an individual one. Because I think there's a real tension there for a lot of people who are more introverted in their faith, who think of their relationship with God as deeply personal. And you seem to be pushing back on that a little.
Yeah, I want to be fair here, because I'm not saying private faith is wrong. It isn't. Your personal walk with God is absolutely essential, and nobody can live that for you. But communion has a corporate dimension that we can't just opt out of because we're introverted or because we prefer to keep things between us and God. Paul is writing to the church. He's not writing a personal devotional. When he says, proclaim the Lord's death until he comes, he's describing something the community does together. And I really believe we are a family at OWC, a genuine family. And when a family gathers at a table, something happens that can't happen when you're eating alone.
That family language is powerful. And it does feel like that on Sunday mornings when we all come forward together.
It really does, and I hope people felt that on Sunday. There's something about everyone coming to that table corporately, not row by row in an orderly fashion where you're just waiting your turn, but actually gathering as a family, that reflects what the early church was doing. They were in it together. They were declaring together. And when you lift that cup alongside your brother or sister, you're saying something to each other too. Not just to God. You're saying, I see you, I'm with you, we belong to the same Lord. And in a world that is constantly trying to isolate us and divide us, that shared act carries a lot of weight.
I want to touch on something you brought up toward the end of the message. The idea of taking the proclamation outside the walls of the church. You talked about what you're doing personally at work, in staff meetings, on social media. How do you connect what happens at the communion table to the outreach work the church is doing?
They're actually the same impulse, just expressed in different venues. The word proclaim that Paul uses in Corinthians, the same category of word is used for preaching the gospel to the lost. So if communion is proclamation, then the overflow of communion should be that we're out there proclaiming in the everyday moments of our lives. For me personally, it's been happening a lot lately at work. I'll be in the middle of a staff meeting and I'll just feel that unction to weave something in. Not force it, not make it weird. Just let it come naturally, and then someone will come find me afterward, maybe a little embarrassed to bring it up in front of others, and we get to have a real conversation about Jesus. And I've been adding people on social media. I'm talking 10 to 12 people a week on my personal Facebook. So we're people from work, people I haven't talked to in years, so that when our church posts something, they're seeing it come through my personal feed first. Does every one of those conversations lead someone through the door on Sunday? Not yet, but we understand it takes God's timing. We don't stop just because we can't see the fruit yet.
That persistence piece is important. You said it Sunday. Paul says keep doing it until he comes. It's not a short assignment.
Not a short assignment at all. It's a lifetime of faithfulness. And I think that reframe helps people not get discouraged when they share their faith and nothing seems to happen immediately. You planted something. The table you came to on Sunday, the proclamation you made with your body when you lifted that cup, that's part of the same chain of witness that goes all the way back to the Last Supper. You're continuing something Jesus started. That's not a small thing, even when it feels ordinary.
Okay, so let's get really practical for a moment, because I think that's where a lot of listeners are sitting right now. They heard this on Sunday, they felt it, they came to the table, but Monday morning comes and, like you said, life starts pulling. What's the one concrete thing you'd tell someone to do differently this week because of this message?
One thing, and I want to be specific because I don't want to give a vague, churchy answer. The one thing I'd say is this: start your day with 5 minutes before the noise starts. Not a huge ask. Set your alarm 5 minutes earlier than you normally would, and before you pick up your phone, before you check the news, before you start running through your to-do list, spend those 5 minutes with Jesus. It doesn't have to be a structured prayer time. You don't have to have your Bible open to a specific chapter and verse. Just spend 5 minutes being still and saying, Lord, I remember what you did and I'm starting this day with you. That's it. Because here's what I've learned. If you do that 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, by day 10 or 12, it starts to become habit. And once it's habit, it's not something you're forcing anymore. It's just part of how you live. That daily remembrance is the same muscle you're using when you come to the communion table. You're just exercising it in the morning instead of on Sunday.
That's so doable and so real. I love that you didn't say read 5 chapters and journal for an hour.
Look, if you're doing that, great, keep going. But for a lot of people, that bar is so high it becomes an excuse not to start at all. 5 minutes is not an excuse. 5 minutes is showing up, and showing up is what coming to the table is all about.
Perfect. Pastor Tim, any final word you want to leave people with before we close out?
Yeah, I just want to say this. If you came to the table on Sunday and something stirred in you, don't let the week bury that. That stirring is the Holy Spirit doing His work. You are not just going through a religious ceremony when you take communion. You are making a declaration that Jesus died for you, that he rose again, that his blood purchased a new covenant, and that he is coming back. That's the most significant thing any of us will ever say. And I want to say this to anyone who might be listening who has never really come to that table with intention. You are welcome here. We are a family, a real one, and there is a place for you at OWC. Come join us on a Sunday morning and discover what it means to come to the table, not as a religious ritual, but as a living, breathing proclamation of what Jesus has done. We would love to see you.
That is such a beautiful invitation, and I hope everyone who's listening feels that warmth because it's real. It's exactly what it feels like walking through those doors in Ravenna. Thanks for spending some time with us today and for going deeper with what you heard Sunday. You can find everything you need, service times, connect with the church, explore more at obc.today. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. We are Outpouring Worship Center, fresh outpouring, every generation.